All right, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be going over Seneca's letter to Lucilius, letter 10. And this is on living to oneself. So let's just jump right into it here. He says in verse 1, "Yes, I do not change my opinion, avoid the many, avoid the few, avoid even the individual. I know of no one whom I should be willing to have you shared. And I see what an opinion of you I have, for I dare to trust you with your own self. Crates, they say, the disciple of the very Stilbo, whom I mentioned in a former letter, noticed a young man walking by himself and asked him what he was doing all alone. I am communing with myself, replied the youth. Pray be careful then, said Crates, and take good heed. You are communing with a bad man." So you can see where this letter is going to go with this, and we'll break this down. So he says, "Yes, I do not change my opinion. Avoid the many, avoid the few, avoid even the individual." So he's saying, look, it is true. I said before, we talked about the crowds. He said, I'm still saying avoid people. Okay? The many, the few, the individual people will corrupt you. There is danger in it. Okay? I know of no one whom I should be willing to have you shared. Okay, so he's saying that I don't know anyone who's worthy of being in your company because I don't trust him. All right, and see what opinion of you I have, for I dare trust you with your own self. So he's saying I have a very high opinion of you because I'm actually trusting you with yourself, and that must mean that you must be of some character, right? And then he's saying that Crates, the disciple of Stilbo, that there's this dialogue. He sees a man walking by himself. The guy says, "I'm communing with myself," and then Crates is like, "Oh, be careful, because you're communing with a bad man." All right, which is our condition. We by ourselves we have some work to do, and that's what he's going to get into. All right, so in verse 2 he says, "When persons are in mourning or fearful about something, we are accustomed to watch them, that we may prevent them from making a wrong use of their loneliness. No thoughtless person ought to be left alone. In such cases, he only plans folly and heaps up future dangers for himself or for others. He brings into play his base desires. The mind displays what fear or shame used to repress. It whets his boldness, stirs his passions, and goads his anger. And finally, the only benefit that solitude confers, the habit of trusting no man and of fearing no witness, is lost to the fool, for he betrays himself." All right, so let's break this down. What he's saying here is he's saying, then when a person is in mourning or they're fearful of something, okay, we generally try to not let them be alone because they're going to do bad things, right? When someone is really upset about something, they're heartbroken, or they are afraid of something, when they're alone, what do? Okay, they plan bad things for themselves and for other people. They make bad decisions. They are subject to their base desires. The mind starts to display what fear or shame used to repress. All right, it basically causes them to do bad things. When you're in a bad state and you're alone, you can't really be trusted, okay? And that's what he's saying. And he's saying that you lose the only benefit that solitude confers, which is the habit of trusting no man and fearing no witnesses, right? And so then he continues on, "Mark therefore what my hopes are for you. Nay, rather, what am I promising myself, inasmuch as hope is merely the title of an uncertain blessing? I do not know any person with whom I should prefer you to associate rather than yourself." Okay, so then he's saying that, okay, what are my hopes for you? Okay, or actually, I take that back. What am I promising myself? Because hope is merely the title of an uncertain blessing. Okay, and he says that I don't know any person whom I believe so much in you that I believe that you are the person who should be left alone. That you can only really trust yourself. I don't know anyone who's worthy of being in your presence beside you. So he's regarding Lucilius very highly in this. All right. In verse 3, he says, "I remember in what a great souled way you hurled forth certain phrases and how full of strength they were. I immediately congratulated myself and said, quote, 'These words did not come from the edge of the lips. These utterances have a solid foundation. This man is not one of many. He has regard for his real welfare.'" So, and again, he's complimenting. He's saying that the words that you're speaking aren't just words you're saying. You really get what you're saying. You really get it. In verse 4, he says, "Speak and live in this way. See to it that nothing keeps you down. As for your former prayers, you may dispense the gods from answering them. Offer new prayers. Pray for a sound mind and for a good health, first of soul and then of body. And of course, you should offer those prayers frequently. Call boldly upon God. You will not be asking him for that which belongs to another." So he's saying here, to keep on asking for these things. Keep on seeking out a sound mind and good health, okay? First of the soul and then of the body. And you should do this frequently because this is what it does belong to you. You're not asking for something that you shouldn't have. But he says in verse 5, "But I must, as is my custom, send a little gift along with this letter. It is a true saying, which I have found in Athenodorus. Know that thou art freed from all desires when thou hast reached such a point that thou prayest to God for nothing except what thou can pray for openly. But how foolish men are now. They whisper the basis of prayers to heaven, but if anyone listens, they are silent at once. That which they are unwilling for men to know, they communicate to God. Do you think, then, that some such wholesome advice as this could be given you? Quote, live among men as if God beheld you. Speak with God as if men were listening. Farewell." So this is a good quote. Again, this letter is a little bit different. This is more of just kind of a praise to Lucilius, on saying that, look, you're capable of being your own counselor, of being in your own presence. A lot of people aren't. So you've done well, right? So you are a person that I don't trust someone else to teach you because you already got a lot of it figured out. Don't get corrupted by other people. But then he's saying here at the end of this letter, right, something that's really important, okay, which is this. Know that thou art freed from all desires when thou hast reached such a point that thou prayest to God for nothing except what you can pray openly, okay? So he's saying this. He's saying that you should act among men as if God was there watching you. Okay, so fully transparent, right? You should act in a way as if you're constantly being judged. That you would be able to stand account before God of what you're doing. But he's saying that you should speak to God as if men were listening as well. So you shouldn't have these things that you're not proud of that you would talk to God about. Like, you should be so open and transparent that you would say those things. And this is a way to keep you honest. Because if you're acting differently in front of men, right? If in front of other people you act differently, then and in private and speaking to God you act differently, then you are two-faced, right? You're unstable, which he'll talk about in some future letters. But if you really think about that, what does that mean? To live among men as if God beheld you. Well, what's the opposite of that? What is it like to not live that way? Well, it looks a lot like getting away with the things that you can get away with. It looks a lot like telling people things that aren't true, that God knows are the truth about you. It's lying, right? It is acting arrogant. It's acting in a way that you're trying to hide what is the real truth internally about you. Because if God were there, if he were there and he knows you, and he saw you acting that way, he'd be like, "Oh, why are you acting like this now? This is weird. You're acting like you didn't just ask me for help yesterday. That you didn't just say, help me to stop being selfish. But then you're acting like you're humble and selfish. That doesn't make any sense, right?" And then if you think about this, the second part of this, speak with God as if men were listening. Well, what does that sound like? Well, I mean, what does it sound like when you're speaking to God as if men weren't listening? Well, it's where you have these secrets, right? Where you're like, God, give me, I fucked up, like I did the, it's like you're talking about stuff, you're asking for things that you might not be proud to ask for, like selfish type of things. Whereas if you're speaking to God as if men were listening, what would you be praying for? You'd be praying for all, good for other people. You wouldn't be talking about selfish types of things, right? You wouldn't be hiding, these things. They would be the same things that you would say to people, right? If you can't say that in private, then you shouldn't say it in public. You shouldn't think it, right? So you should be transparent. That's what he's ultimately saying here. So, all right, that is it for today. It's a short one. We'll see you tomorrow.